Hey everybody, I am so sorry for that. My computer just rebooted, did that Microsoft update thing, and I just could not stop it. It happened in 3 seconds and it kept me out for about 30 minutes. That's insane. So I'm so sorry. I was trying so hard to figure out what to do. I'm going to look into if StreamYard, if I can get an app where I could maybe use the cell phone as a backup. Won't be nearly as good in some ways, but I'm seeing if I can do that going forward. So I'm so sorry. So anyway, give it just a minute here for anyone else that wants to jump in. And I hate that it happened because I'm sure there's some people who just had a few minutes and that was it. So some people won't be able to come back in, but that's frustrating stuff. Anyway, just give it one more minute here and we'll see if anyone else cares to join. Again, I hope you're all having a great Saturday. And my sincere apologies to those who were in the earlier live stream. Definitely was not expecting that by any stretch. It's hard to even imagine just being kicked out and you can't have access to your computer for 30 minutes. You know, it's just like, ugh, what do you do? You know. Anyway, let's give it one more second here. Looks like we got a few people that came back in. So the topic today, again, is survival mode. I was talking before, and I'm sorry. Hi, Marie. Thank you so much. Again, my apologies. I'll definitely be looking into backups and ways. It's also, I think, time for me when I can't afford it right now, but hopefully at some point I can afford like a newer computer. I don't know that my computer being old was the problem in this particular case, but it certainly could be. But anyway, for those of you that are just joining this and weren't in the first part, I think YouTube will probably have saved it. So if you're in this one and you're like, why are we picking up in the middle of something? The first part is saved as a separate video on YouTube. So we'll call this survival mode. We'll call this surviving Christianity survival mode part 2. But again, we were talking about before how, you know, when you're in survival mode, you're basically in a state where you're trying to survive, get through every day. You're just trying to get through the next moment, the next crisis, etc. And it feels like you're on edge all the time, bracing for impact. And I was sort of leaving off there where I think when we look at that, we've talked a lot in the past few years about the idea of people being in fight or flight or freeze mode with these responses where or hormones are sort of triggering these responses. And we're really facing threats that we have to either face head on or run from them. Or if everything else fails, we have to sort of shut down in some way. Hey, Miss I, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. I appreciate that. And Stephen, thank you so much for your patience. Again, I apologize for the issue. I'll be looking again at ways to mitigate that if it ever happens again. But, you know, when we're in that stress hormone phase where it's adrenaline and cortisol and things in our brains, and we're trying to manage this situation, it feels like we're really being chased. You know, it's like when we were just evolving and we were primates and so forth. And before that, as a species, it's like we're being chased by a wild animal. We're being faced with some kind of physical threat that's going to kill us or something horrible. And it's like our body evolved this way of staying alive and trying to fight if possible. But I think the problem too is that our brains can't always distinguish between physical threats and, you know, psychological or emotional ones. And I'm sure that you know, therapists talk through that and think through that with people in counseling. But it is a reality that it feels like it's as if your life is just coming to an end, even if it's not. It's like your brain tricks you almost. And some things are truly threatening us. I think some things are perceived threats. But in this day and age, you know, for how we've evolved, we're focused a lot on our sense of self, like who are you? How are people perceiving me? Are my beliefs right? Is my social standing acceptable? And it's almost like our brains slowly on a lower level trigger this daily little survival response of like, you're not measuring up, and things just get complicated in our heads. And I was thinking about how sometimes, of course, our fears, sometimes our fears are a big driver for that. Our uncertainties and of course conflict with other people, even with our belief systems. Things, of course, like abuse and neglect and loss are going to come into the equation. Anytime you're feeling judged and criticized and pressured, it's going to come to the equation. You find yourself constantly being triggered as it were, by situations where you have to survive, number one, but also in other situations that are sort of offshoots of it. And this is starting to move towards Christianity. You end up being forced to suppress yourself in some way, your authentic self even, and you feel powerless, and you question your worthiness or your safety, but you're doing it for what seems to be a necessary goal, at least short term. We get stuck in these mental, psychological environments, and our brains perceive all this as a threat. Like, how do I survive this? Am I looked at by the community as a holy person, as a righteous person? Am I looked at as a godly person? And it's like we get on high alert day in and day out, it seems like, as a Christian. So, have you all noticed that you end up slipping yourself into survival mode throughout the day, even though you've escaped Christianity? That survival mode is a real big deal. And I was curious, in the chat, like if you have any triggers that you feel like put you into survival mode. But I think, and I'll read through the comments as they come in. I'm sorry for the ones that I missed on the earlier live stream that ended prematurely. But I was thinking about how when we stay in this survival mode for a long, long time, it can really have serious consequences for our health, for our mental health, of course, but our physical health. Our bodies just can't rest because we're constantly on high alert. This chronic stress that's attacking us with anxiety, maybe, and depression, and even other health issues that come up. And I think a lot of us find it hard to focus on anything that's not related to that immediate survival issue. Like your world just like shrinks down to this one issue, and we sort of become numb, especially if we feel powerless, like we can't fight it. I mean, we get disconnected from our feelings. Sometimes some of us get hypersensitive and reactive to even the smallest triggers, where it's just like, and we know people like that. I'm very much a non-drama kind of person. I don't like to be dramatic. I don't like to attract drama. I like a very quiet and peaceful life. But, some people really get upset at the smallest things, and we know people like that. And those people often find it hard to trust other people, or to open up, or to feel safe, even in relationships that otherwise would be, a safe place. And it's, have you ever heard, like, how like a radio or some kind of machine that can play a song or make a sound, even your computer, there can be some machines that make this little hum, like, and sometimes if there's, loud music playing, you don't hear it. But then when the music goes off or something goes off, it's something suddenly like, what is that noise? And it feels like that to me. Like we're in this constant, there's like a low level hum of tension that never goes away. It's like we're wired to think that the bad stuff is just around the corner, and we lose the capacity, again, to relax and to be fully present in our lives. I think to me, this is important, because to me, when we understand a little bit more of what's happening and how this survival mode is operating inside of our head, we can start to see how certain systems, like Christianity, of course, we always go back to that one. It's part of what's keeping us trapped, and we can't always see it. We can't always realize it. So I want to, again, I'm going to kind of focus, tighter and tighter on this. But I feel like when we dive into Christianity with the doctrines and the theology and the culture, we realize that there are aspects of it that really do directly keep us stuck in survival mode. And that's not a blanket statement about all Christians and all denominations and all aspects of theology and every way that people live their lives. But there's an awful lot out there. I think there's arguably a huge percentage of churches and denominations where the experience is very similar, where Christianity is feeling like in different ways, but ultimately the same outcome, that it's creating environments where survival mode becomes your default. Your body and your mind is just like perpetually braced for impact. You just feel like what's about to happen next. And so I do want to dive into that. Let me just look at the comments for one section here and see if I missed anything important. It's all important. Tay, thank you so much for joining. If you were part of the early one, I apologize for the issues there. Accidentally agnostic, jumping right in the deep end here with some thoughts. Sinful nature was the scapegoat and the boogeyman. It effectively shut down any deeper thinking on how I wanted to handle situations and life in general. So survive sinful nature. Don't think deeper. Yeah, that's a great place to start. Your sin nature is a big, big, big deal. Absolutely. My hubs has a lot of these behaviors. He always wears his God glasses. To me, it's a crutch. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. I like the idea of a crutch. Not that I like the idea of crutches existing, but just it's a good way to summarize what's happening. So true. It's like I'm speaking instead of Tim. Yeah, I think a lot of us have a lot of commonalities here, Steve and I agree. Which we had different experiences, but it comes down to a couple of basic similarities. Thank you so much, Philip. Tay, yes, fight and flight mode constantly when people as believers try to fix you or others. Such a stressful environment and has affected my health. Yeah, I'm so sorry, Tay. I know you said yesterday you were just starting your journey. I really hope that it gets better and better over the next few months. Yeah, it's the fight or flight mode is awful. Many of the old tube radios and even TVs had that sound. Yeah, exactly. Tim has such a good grasp on this. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm trying. I feel like I'm stabbing in the dark sometimes, but I'm not alone knowing how many people he's actually speaking for. Thank you so much, Stephen. Love you all back as well. Unfortunately, Christians aren't happy until you believe what they believe. Yes, that's a big, big point. That's a great one. In fact, I think, Emery, you just gave me a topic for an entire live stream or a monologue. Telling kids they have to survive on secular education systems. Yeah, it's interesting how when you look at that, they kind of tell you to be careful, like just do the minimum you have to do to get your passing grade, but it's all they're really atheists and godless people. So going back for a second to some thoughts about Christianity and its doctrines and how that changes, where we're going with this topic. I think that many of us, just starting overall, we're just taught that the world as a whole, the world itself it's not a safe place. It's just not. The world itself is a very dangerous place to be. And I mean, how many of you would agree with that? How many of you would say you felt like that was a truism for you, that the idea that we're stuck in a world that, of course, is very fallen. It's very much under the condemnation of God, and God is very much going to judge it because of the fall. And at some point, we're going to end up in a spot where God's going to have to destroy the earth. And when you look at it from this standpoint of demons and the devil, this world is full of spiritual traps and demonic influences and all these hidden dangers. Like something's always threatening, I'm going to take you away from God. If you watch the wrong TV show by accident. I remember, of course, I think parents are accurately hypervigilant about some shows that kids could watch. You don't want kids accidentally seeing something that's very much of an adult nature. And it's a good thing that there's, different ratings. But there was still, as Christians, much, much, much greater hypervigilance that there's dangers that are always threatening to take your kids away from the straight and narrow. And so you're constantly vigilant. You're always on the lookout for anything that's going to lead you into sin or separate you from God's love or from a mind that's fixed on him. And that's how it plays out in our day-to-day lives. Is just, again, we're not just cautious, we're hypervigilant. You're told to guard your hearts, guard your mind, avoid anything that seems worldly, and be wary of the media that you consume, the friends you keep, the thoughts you entertain. Even though it's this sense of not just is the world unsafe, but you're really unsafe yourself. Because you can be presumptuous, you can be, ignoring the things that God has said. You can have those, we call them sins of commission, but also sins of omission. You didn't do something wrong, but you did fail to do the right thing. You failed to stay in the Word today or pray, and you're a danger to yourself. Your own desires are deceitful and dangerous in different ways, and you have this sort of, like, you're thinking of it as if a camera that you might stick outside of your house to watch if there's an intruder. You're kind of doing that with the world, but then you're also putting one inside your own mind, your own heart, this internal surveillance. You're always watching yourself, this self-monitoring, saying, am I slipping? Am I failing? And I'm just curious for you all, did you ever feel like you were in that mode where you're constantly on guard, watching every thought? You're told take every thought captive for Christ. How did that vigilance sort of show up in your life? And a quick side topic that comes right in after that to me is not just the world, including us in our sin, but the hidden world of hell. Like you're sort of aware that you are one slip away from hell. It's obviously one of the most powerful tools to keep us in survival mode. But the idea that if you don't live perfectly, if you don't believe perfectly, behave right, believe right, think right, repent perfectly, you could be in danger of being damned to eternal punishment. It doesn't just scare us. I mean, it scares, no pun intended, it scares the hell out of us. It shapes your entire existence. You are in danger. And even though many of us would confess as kids, I believe, I believe, I believe, we knew, because we would repeat the process, and we would get saved again, or rededicate our lives to the Lord later. We knew that there was just so much at stake. It scared us so badly. And you were in this perpetual state of anxiety. And I know for me, the whole topic of Lordship salvation through John MacArthur, many of you might know that concept, but the idea that, yes, it's faith alone that saves you, but what is the nature of saving faith? Is this just, oh God, I just want to get out of jail free card? Okay. No, that's not, God's not handing out get out of jail free cards. He's not saying, if you just sign on the dotted line, I'll give you the glories of heaven. He's not looking for you to do something in a moment. He's looking for you to do something with your life. He doesn't want a part of you. He wants you. And therefore, the nature of saving faith is that it will surrender wholly to the Lord. The Holy Spirit, for goodness sake, is coming in and cleaning up the whole place, transforming it. So if you're saying to yourself, I kind of want God, but I want a little bit of the world too. I'm going to go to the smorgasbord. I'll take a little Jesus, and I'll take a little immorality. I'll take a little bad language. I'll take a little this and a little that. It's like they're saying that's not what saving faith does. That's a human faith. You're just kind of mouthing words. Saving faith from God is this kind of faith that God puts in you. Ephesians 2:8-9, for by grace are you saved through faith, and that faith is not of yourselves. It is a gift of God. The faith that is a gift from God is a faith that does work. It's a faith that will produce sanctification and holiness. And so we're constantly questioning, am I doing enough? Is my faith real faith, or is it fake faith? Is it human faith, or is it faith that God has given me that does actually work? Am I repenting enough to avoid the fate of fooling myself into thinking I'm saved? And that was pushed to me a lot. Was they would say things like, ladies and gentlemen, in this church, there are people who are sure that they're saved. You grew up in a Christian home. You've come to church every Sunday, every Wednesday. You have given faithfully. You've been involved in missions trips. You know that you're saved. And ladies and gentlemen, some of you that think that right now are not saved. You're not. And I heard that endlessly in church. And it was to put the fear, to say, you have to make sure you can't inherit your faith. God doesn't have spiritual grandchildren. It has to be your faith, not your parents' faith or this community's faith, your faith. It's about your personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And so people that had lived their whole lives in church and glad to do so were still told, be careful. You might be in danger. You might be on the slippery slope of this being just a purely human act. You're just going through motions. So how did, to me, I would just want to know, how did the fear of hell shape your behavior? Did you find yourself sort of making choices out of that fear, or instead of like a true desire and a conviction? I'm going to see if there's any comments here on that. 1 second. Being irrationally scared of the world. Yeah, very much so. Very fear-based. And Kalitha, great to see you here. Great to see you here. Thank you so much for joining. In the world, but not of the world. Yeah, that's a perfect verse to quote in that sense. Always in danger. Yep. Teachings were designed to live in present tense. The fear of past and future is mute unless you want control. Yeah. Yeah. And ironically, though, the idea of the future with either heaven or hell was very much part of that for me. And in some ways, I would argue that my experience with Christianity was designed to not keep me in the present. It was designed to say the present is just a blink of an eye, and then in the future, your real life will begin. But I think we're probably just looking at it from two different sides of this same coin. God's anger subsided and Tim is allowed to stream again. Yeah, exactly. I'm a bad person. Yeah, we're all condemned. We're born condemned. Fearful of losing your eternal security. Yeah. For a lot of people, that was like a non-issue, which is interesting how some people just said, it doesn't even matter. If I said the words as a 3-year-old, I said the words, I'm in, like I'm sealed. But for other people, it was like, I said the words, but I don't know for sure if it was Was it sincere enough? I said it again at 8. Was that sincere? I said it at 11. Was that sincere? I said it at 15. And of course, you don't feel sincere in part because you're sinning, you're doing things, human things, but also you're growing perhaps in your theology. You're understanding more of the, the glories of the gospel. And so as you do that, you're like, oh, I didn't really understand the gospel so much. I did not understand my depravity. I was so depraved, and maybe I was doing this before out of my own power instead of God's power. And so, yeah, you just keep repeating it just to be sure. The shame of sexual sin kept me in survival mode my entire life, hiding, feeling guilty, praying, confessing, getting caught a few times. Yeah. You're fun. That's one topic. I'll probably get to that in a little bit, but yeah, sexual sin is a big deal for a lot of us. The idea that if someone knows what's going on inside of our heads, you got to hide it. You got to hide it, or people are going to think badly of you. Yes, thank you to whoever sacrificed one goat or 2 pigeons. Well said. Like many, puberty had me on a fix. Yep. The fight is never done, always doubting doubt. Yeah. Yes, it was exhausting. My head always hurt and was always in fear if I didn't get it right. Yeah, the perfectionism, we did touch on that maybe a week or so ago in a different live stream, but perfectionism is right in the tail of some of these topics. Pascal's wager, yeah. They're still trying very hard to make us afraid of Satan and his fallen angels and demons. Yeah, it's interesting. I saw an article even this morning about some pastor of a church talking about how it seemed like Trump had not done very well in the debate and that Kamala had, and that was evidence of demonic oppression. It's interesting. They just, anytime they're not winning, they think it's the demons. Teaching is where to answer questions with faith and allow one to live with blessings without overthinking. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Elusive assurance of salvation is torturous. I speak from experience. Yeah, it really is. Yeah, and especially when there's sins that you repeat, whether it's masturbation or just feeling like you're not reading the Bible enough, what have you, anything at all that feels like it's a repeat sin, a repeat struggle, it's gonna knock on that door pretty hard. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologize for that. Thank you, Global Solidarity. I will try to be more mindful of that. Appreciate your letting me know. Thank you, Miss Big Up. Appreciate your coming back. Sorry for the issue with the earlier live stream. Pascal's wager is a bait and switch. Yeah. Putting on the full armor of God, it's like every day is a battle, so you don't know where the enemy is and how he will attack you, so you must always be prepared for war. Yeah, exactly. Always prepared. There is another problem that is seen with Christians, possibly Jews and Muslims too. They do the thinking for their God as if they took an appointment, asked for his judgments, thus speaking on his behalf. Yeah, that's very true. And I think maybe is another side issue to that is the idea of people were constantly on edge about, am I hearing correctly from God? Am I interpreting the Bible correctly? Am I interpreting the doors he's opening, his will? And it wasn't quite fight or flight, but it was a bit of survival mode in the sense of if I'm misinterpreting God, then I could be operating in the flesh, and this constant self-checking, am I working in the flesh, or is this truly God in me? And how do I know? And especially when you have cases where you sense God opening doors and then it just blows up in your face. It's like, wow, I guess I didn't understand what God was up to. I was doing this all in the flesh. Philip, you were always made to believe you were the only one with questions and doubts. You were made to feel that you were the only one thinking it's nonsense. Yeah, very true. Argue with myself about God, but I'm God. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, really, we're not God in that sense. I know you're not saying that in the truest sense, but yeah, we're arguing with ourselves when we pray or argue with God. We're talking to ourselves the whole time. I was told recently, because I no longer pray, I cannot expect God to help me. Yeah. There's a verse that says, if I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. So yeah, if you're taking the path away from God and godliness, the Bible does say that he won't hear you. Okay, thank you so much, Global Solidarity. I'll try to keep that at a minimum. It might be my mouse as I move it, but I once knew a bad house painter. He thinned so much he had to repaint. That's funny. Yeah, there's a metaphor there for what we're talking about here, but I'll think on that one and bring it up in a different live stream. How Christianity keeps you in survival mode is an apt question. They have this persecution complex, as if the world is conspiring against them and going out of their way to target you. Yeah. And repeat sins, that's it, wreaked havoc on me. Christianity doesn't give us power to overcome, but all the crippling guilt. Yeah, for sure. And that's a good segue to the next thing I was going to talk about was in the Christian culture, I think there's this pressure to conform, and let me make that disappear. There's a lot of pressure to conform and perform, where if you are not in line with what the pastor says, if there's any sense that you're asking the wrong questions, like someone just brought up, if you're expressing doubts, you're really in danger. You're going to be in danger for sure of losing favor in the community, or maybe leadership if you're on the leadership team or the worship team. But even greater, you could lose your standing with God. And so there is this atmosphere where you have to hide parts of yourself. And I know a lot of people, I've mentioned this before, but when I was at Bible college, it was just like common fare that when the men got together, the mostly single men at that age, single Bible college students, many of them going into pastoral ministry, were supposed to be doing small group Bible studies, accountability groups, and it was always about masturbation. And so you have to hide that. And you can finally find these little niche groups where you can be yourself, but it's all like, we're understanding this is a private discussion, right? Like, we're not going to be publishing this. But people have to pretend in public to do the right thing and to look the right way, or they're not going to be safe. And it's exhausting. You feel like you're on a hamster wheel. You're always performing, always self-monitoring. And you don't want to slip up, or at least don't let anybody see you slip up. And you're very, 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 very fearful of rejection. And especially when you think about the idea that this, for many people, was going to be their career. It's like, if you slip up, you're literally going to lose your chance to be a pastor. Like, you've wanted to be a pastor for 20 years. You make one mistake, you're talking about decades worth of preparation down the tubes in minutes. Very much for all the grace that was preached, it ends up being a graceless experience. So I was just curious, if any of you felt like you had to sort of wear a mask to fit in, and just how would you say that affected your mental health? I think as a corollary to that, there's this perfectionism that we talked about last week. That's certainly unattainable. It's like this never-ending cycle of guilt and shame. It is different in different circles, so I definitely want to make sure I'm clear that not every group does it the same way. A lot of people would just say, just follow Jesus, but Jesus knows you're weak. Just be his disciple, just follow him. But the Bible is really clear that he doesn't want you to just follow him. He wants you to be like him. Strive to be like Jesus. The Bible talks a lot about be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. First John talks about if you're focused on sin and you're letting sin in your life, then you're not really living in the light. And this perpetual failure cycle comes up. You make mistakes. We kind of, that's to be human is to be flawed, to have limits. But in the Christian circles, it feels a little bit like that's not really, you can only use that as an excuse so far, because falling short of the ideal is not just a mistake, it's a sin, and it's a failure. It's a deep inadequacy. You're exposing your unworthiness, and especially when you think it's okay to be sort of explaining away your sin when you're an unbeliever, but once you've come to Christ, you've got the gospel, you've got the glories of your ultimate forgiveness right there at your doorstep, and you're sort of spitting on the cross, as it were. You're saying, I'd rather focus on sin at least a little bit. And if you're constantly repenting of the same sin, you're kind of putting a new nail in the cross of Christ. And you should feel bad about that, as the message we're told. You should feel like you're messed up. Your understanding of the gospel is really warped. Like, you are warped if you can sin and not feel cringy about that sin. So, did you all feel like perfectionism came in pretty tightly for your walk with God? And I'm just curious how many of you would say you feel like you could measure up, or that it was irrelevant, that it was just, it's all God's grace. I didn't even try to measure up. I just said, God, if anything good comes out of me, it's all glory to you. But otherwise, I'm going to confess I'm just a worthless sinner. I can't claim any glory. I can't claim any track record. But anyway, interesting stuff. how it plays out. I think the big thing for me was it doesn't matter how hard you tried. You're trying is almost like its own cycle where you're like, okay, I am going to try harder, and it looks on the surface like you're being successful. Like, yes, you tried harder, and look at the great outcome. But in reality, on the inside that what you were really trying and or the way it actually played out is that you basically just put, like, if say you had a big scar on your face, you just put on more makeup, you just put on more blush or whatever. You're covering up the scar, but it's still the same. And just because you're getting better at figuring out which shade of skin covering really blends in with your skin, you're like, oh, you're almost making it disappear. That's awesome. But in reality, nothing's really changing. You're just getting better at masking it. I mean, you wash that off, your scar is it's still right there. Let me go to a few comments here. Let's see here. I think this is where I left off. Repeat sins. That wreaked havoc on me. Christianity doesn't give us power to overcome, but it's all the crippling guilt. Yeah. The repeat sins definitely got a lot of us. What if God is a demon sent by another religion's devil to lead you astray? Yeah. Yeah. And a corollary, what if God, even if he's Yahweh, what if God is actually sending a trick question to say, are you willing, like the people that get into heaven are the people who are discerning enough to discern that the Yahweh character as presented in the Bible is a psychopath? What if he's testing you to say, I'm not going to worship that God? What if that's the real test? You just never know. I was always told doubting is a sin. I've always questioned, but I was in fear. Now I feel so much freedom questioning and using my brain. It's such mind control. Yeah, agreed, Tay. And by the way, I don't know, I haven't checked my email yet this morning, but feel free to reach out about an interview or at least getting some information about getting connected for that, even if it's down the line. I'd love to hear your interview or hear more about your journey and give you the tools to prepare. Yes, everyone is more worried about you and your personal problems rather than their own things. Yeah, that's the big thing. Is a lot of it is just, it's a place to gossip and say, look at their sin, look at their sin. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It's like, oh my God, we're just another social club. I still find it hard not to self-monitor, stuck in a cycle at this point. Yeah, I would agree. And the idea of sort of managing people's expectations. How are they seeing me? It's a big deal. I left because I felt like a hypocrite. Yeah, I'd say a lot of us would agree with that. Allie Bree. Allie, I saw something in an atheist group on Facebook that I thought looked like your name. Are you in Georgia here? If you are, let me know. I'm just curious. But I thought I saw you in some kind of Georgia atheist group. But either way, I love to connect people who are local in case I can ever. I'm trying to get together like an actual local secular atheist group. Call it atheist church, for lack of a better term at the moment. But anyway, just let me know. It's hard for me to separate the masking I did as an autistic versus the masking I was doing to fit in the specific in-group of Christians. Either way, I was in survival mode, and the church kept me there. Yeah, that is a fascinating part of it, to think about how different ways that our minds work and mental health constructs that we're dealing with, how they end up changing the way we perceive these situations too. I thought about that too in a different sense. I'll keep this short, but isn't it interesting that your perception of God is based in so many ways on what's going on in your head? And what's going on in your head, of course, is based on like how your brain formed when you were a baby in the womb, and how your parents treated you, what traumas you did or didn't go through. And so to think about the very way that the tools that you have to filter and conceive of God are so different from the next person and the next person and the next person. So when the pastor says, for example, God is loving, or God is holy, or God is this or that or the other, God is faithful, you're going to interpret it all from the perspective of what your brain can do physically and what it's been through experientially. And it's just so interesting how God is supposedly judging us all for belief or non-belief, even though we can perceive it so differently. They also tell you the only thing that's keeping them from sinning is an ancient book. If that's the only thing that's keeping you from killing and raping, you should check yourself into prison. Yeah, And a lot of them ask that question, like, where's your morality coming from now? I was like the joke, like, yeah, now that I've escaped a book full of genocide and land theft and child brides and stoning and all that, now I have no morality. It's crazy. Sin equals misaiming. Yeah, missing the mark. Thank you so much, Invisible Jesus. I appreciate that. Happy birthday to me. And sin equals control through shame. Yep. The mark is following God's commandments. All God's commandments cue toward observance. Yeah, exactly. It all does come back to that. I began to dislike the feeling of worthlessness. It was one of my triggers to begin questioning my beliefs. Yeah, that's a big one. When you just feel like wow, is this really as good as my life gets? That just to feel like I'm constantly a piece of garbage. Celibacy is excessive activity, not abstinence. Yeah, I'll have to think about that one, but I would say that I may not be understanding you correctly, but I'll just say what comes to mind when I read your comment. In many ways, celibacy can become, I think, still create a very active sex life in your head, and a lot of people are just driven to fantasy. I certainly was. I certainly am. I mean, I'm driven to fantasy now, but I don't have any shame about it. I enjoy fantasy very much. Sexual fantasies to me is a beautiful part of life. It's been one of the most healing parts of my life. It's just about all I've got as well. But in a sense, when you're a Christian and you're giving yourself and allowing fantasies to be part of your life, yeah, you just feel like, oh my gosh, I'm sexless and I'm not doing anything about it. I'm technically honoring God, but in my mind, I'm on overdrive. It really sets you up to fail. Sexuality is a big part of failure in Christianity. One of the overwhelming, demoralizing things that encouraged me to leave religion was never being able to live up to perfection. Yeah. The language changes the translation. Can you give the StreamYard link? Sure. Give me 1 second. Are you referring to someone else being able to watch this with us? Let me see here. So this is the link from YouTube. If somebody wants to, Mehdi, if somebody wants to watch this, that's where they can watch it from. Hope that's what you're referring to. Another point of idea that this world is not worth and life is temporary means that it creates the mindset that you can destroy Earth by exploiting targeted animals unnecessarily. Yeah, I agree with that, Oraculum. That is very true. That yeah, not only are you worthless, but this world is so temporary and sort of worthless that, yeah, you can just do whatever you want to. It's sort of like it's sort of God's garden, so make it bloom, but at the end, he's going to burn it all up anyway. So don't hang on to it too hard. Allie, from a very young age, I assumed my neurodivergent tendencies were my inherent sin. I had to hide myself from everyone I loved for fear of being seen as a sinner. Yeah. Yeah, that is a big deal. I think it's getting more commonplace for it to be an acceptable topic, but I think a generation or two that was really seen as wrapped up in sin, especially if you had trouble obeying your parents. It was like the answer is not that you're neurodivergent. The answer is not that you have ADHD or autism. Just simply obey. Bow your knee and bend your knee to your parents and bend your knee to your heavenly parent. But yeah, I'm glad that neurodivergence is becoming a more acceptable topic. But I think even when I was a child, it was seen in conservative churches as just another evidence of sin. I found it strange when I was little that people were so obsessed about each other's clothing. Yeah, that's true. When I was little, it wasn't as much clothing in terms of quality, but it was more about the modesty culture. That was a big deal for my groups. I am Catholic with atheism like theism. I more want to go to atheism and atheism like theism. I'm not sure if I understood that. Feel free to rephrase that. Allie, I'm in South Carolina, but I have lots of Christian family in Loganville, Walnut Grove area. Okay, very cool. And Allie, I think I may have said this to you before, but if you are at a spot where you wanted to ever do an interview, please do feel free to reach out to me on Facebook at Harmonic Tim. Speaking facts, hopefully. Did we go to church to compare clothing and who wore the latest fashions? Okay. I never saw that really in my church. I didn't pick up on that, but that is interesting. I could see that. I could see some people feeling like, especially if you're in a mode of if you're going to be reverent to God, you bring your best, just like you would bring the best spotless lamb, spotless goat to sacrifice. In the current version of that is you bring your best clothing. I could definitely see that. And especially at least the professional, like men in suits and ties, women in very fancy dresses. And it's interesting how in yesteryear, a lot of churches would have the women wear the hats. Like it was considered disrespectful to not wear a hat. But you see these old movies and stuff where they'd wear these elaborate hats where you can't even like see over them from the pew behind them. It's just like, wow, what a distraction. But that was somehow seen as reverent to God or something, or just the thing to do. It's easy to survive secular education, but it's hard to survive actually reading the Bible. Yeah, I'd agree with that. New Age teachings emphasize the faults of other religions and misinterpretations. Yeah. I wouldn't want to look at New Age teachings as if they're really more helpful, but I'm sure that they do at least emphasize some of the issues that religions brought up. New Age teachings aren't going to give you any better outcome, though. They're going to be another version of garbage. Women and girls still had to wear hats then. My sister hated it. Yeah. We had to cover our head in church always. Yep. Which God is alive? Theist? Is it Yahweh, Allah, Zoroaster, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu? Yeah. Christianity isn't bad at all. It's all because of false Christianity and false Christians. I know about good Christian actions. Christianity isn't bad at all. I think you're on the wrong channel, Carlo. Christianity is bad from its core tenets through and through. Everything from its starting point in ancient Judaism with the Yahweh character and as being a psychopath, to blood magic and scapegoating, to the idea of human sacrifice being a good thing, to the idea that if you don't believe like us, you're going to burn in hell. Christianity is all bad through and through. The doctrines are bad. There's no part of it that I would say is necessary for having a good life. And most aspects of Christianity are going to create incredible trauma for people these days in endless ways. So, if you're a Christian or you're sort of leaning towards some version of it, I would suggest and highly recommend that you look deeply at the origins of Christianity and think twice about what you're in. It is a human sacrifice, blood magic, death cult. It's not a good thing. So you pretty much wear trainers and a lovely skirt, Valcap. Yeah, it is Shackle Breezer Reloaded. Interesting handle. Christianity is horrible. Christianity really is horrible. So let me go back to my comments here, or my notes rather, to give us to the next stage, and hopefully I've got enough time to wrap us up shortly. I know I've kept you all for a bit, but again, I was thinking about this topic of survival mode. And again, I'm looking away from the comments now to my thoughts on this. The idea of just trust God for everything. On the surface, I think that sounds very comforting, but in practice, it often means doubting yourself. Just trust God; He'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. Don't listen to your own understanding. Don't listen to your own ways of your own wisdom. Look at God's wisdom. And so you're supposed to suppress your thought process, your intuition, even your desires. You're taught that your heart is deceitful, your understanding is flawed, and you need divine guidance. You need it desperately. Divine guidance from God is wisdom for every decision. And I think it can lead to a kind of paralysis where you're afraid to make choices or take risks without some kind of divine sign. I mean, some of us are like, I'm going to wait until I clearly see God opening up the doors. And if God doesn't open up the doors, then it's kind of his way of saying, be still, just stay there. You're being taught to surrender your agency and your autonomy, to look outside yourself for answers, and to distrust your inner voice. And so you end up being, again, in a sort of survival mode where you're afraid to make your own decisions. You're sort of stuck in that fight or flight mode. You're like, I'm going to just kind of sit here and quiver and worry and wait. Like, God, what am I going to do? What's going to happen? God, when are you going to answer? When is the answer coming? And we would all fear we would be told that prayer is going to be met with a yes, a no, or a wait. And of course, we just hated the fact that God would sometimes say, wait. And all the time, there was no wait. There was no yes or no. It was all just us talking to ourselves. But I'm curious if some of you can relate to that, where you feel afraid to make your decisions. So you're sort of waiting for a sign, and that anxiety of when is the sign going to come? When do I know that the door is open? Do you have a sense that you can trust yourself and your autonomy? When I look at this, I think, and I know because of time, I'm just going to be scratching the surface here today. maybe we'll revisit this topic shortly. But I think about the idea of what this does to you long term. What is the toll of living in survival mode when you have the fear of hell, the pressure to conform, to perform, the demand for perfection, the surrender of your autonomy? They all work together, and they're keeping you in this survival mode. You're always anxious. You're always striving. You're sort of waiting for God. You're always on edge as to what happens next. What demons have I accidentally, invited into my scenario? What sins have I accidentally entertained too much? And that's going to plant a seed of ungodliness that's going to come back to bite me. In what way am I secretly harboring sins? And if someone really knew what's going on in my life or my heart, they would just say, look, I'm not even sure you're a Christian. And you feel like you're wearing a mask. And your body, your mind, they end up being in a constant state of tension. And over time, I think it really does take a serious toll. I think a lot of you would agree that it can lead us to being chronically depressed or have anxiety, even physical issues, and truly being disconnected from ourselves. We lose touch with who we are because we're so focused on who you should be that you're never focused on who you actually are. You're so focused on the standards and the goal of like, this is what you're achieving. This is what you're focused on: less sin, on more righteousness, less you, more God, less worldliness, more heavenly mindedness. And it's always, the life is always up ahead as you get to the next levels of holiness, as you kind of graduate through repenting of your sin more and more, hating yourself more and more, being so glad to surrender and to be a slave of Christ, that you will kind of graduate to greater levels of righteousness and holiness and usefulness to God. And it's always like, when do I get to the next level? And I relapsed. Oh, this is horrible. I hope no one knows. Oh, I'm moving forward. Oh, I'm not. No, I'm not. And then you see these examples of these pastors who they're in the pastorate for 10, 15, 20 years. And all of a sudden something comes out where they confess this horrible sin. And you're like, oh my gosh, another one bit the dust. Another one made his life shipwreck, or he's out of ministry now. That could be me. And, am I really graduating into higher levels of dedication to God and to holiness? Or am I just fooling myself and fooling everybody around me? And you get into that state of anxiety. And you're always looking to, how can I get to the next level? Or at least how can I appear to be at the next level, as opposed to just how can I enjoy who I am and where I'm at right now? I think for us to move past that, is just to recognize it first, to say we have been in survival mode. And I think I'm going to have to revisit this because there's a lot more I wanted to say in terms of the examples of how it comes up. But just to sort of summarize it for today, our environment in church, that faith environment, as it were, it kept us stuck in so many ways. And it's not because you are actually sinful. It's not because you're actually unworthy or actually broken. It's just because the system was designed that way. They need you to be in that anxiety because they need you to feel like you're sick and they have the cure. They need you to come back every week to get your prescribed medicine. I have asthma, and I know that I've had that since I was a child. I know that I'm always going to have to keep in mind that, do I have enough whatever albuterol around that if something happens that I could be okay? And you get used to checking where you're at with that. And it's sort of a parallel with Christianity. You just kind of get used to checking in on your prescription. Am I breathing in the Spirit of God correctly, or is there an issue? Do I have spiritual asthma? And what do I need? Oh, well, you need to go you need more medicine, refill your prescription, get back to church, get back to the pastor. The system's designed that way. It wants you to feel like your spiritual lungs don't work right. Now, my physical lungs don't work as great as they should. And I actually have an issue in my throat where one of my vocal cords is partially paralyzed. So, which is interesting, and quite an interesting journey to discover that. They just stick a camera, a pleasant experience sticking a camera way down my nose. Ugh. But they discovered one of my vocal cords is partially paralyzed. But in a spiritual sense, that's what they're trying to say is, look, you are spiritually paralyzed. You are spiritually not working. We have the cure. We have the medicine. We have the prescription. Come back, and we will fix you. And you never feel like you're okay. You're never going to be okay. You need their medicine. You're not supposed to trust yourself in that environment. So the healing that needs to come is that we need to learn to trust ourselves. Yeah, this is a journey, of course. We can't just flip a switch and say, I do it now. But if we're going to lead to a more peaceful life, a more authentic life, a life of freedom and peace, we're going to have to say, this is a horrific cycle that has been imposed upon us, and we have to move beyond survival mode, starting with trusting ourselves again and saying to yourself, you're okay. And your sense of self is good. Like you can say to yourself, I'm a great person. I'm fine just the way I am. I'm just fine. And for so many of us, that is such a weird thing to say. You're just fine the way you are. You don't have to achieve some next level. You don't have to graduate to be okay. And it's okay to be human. It's really okay. I'm curious again. I'm going to wrap this up here with reading a few comments, then we'll say goodbye for now. And then I am doing another live stream tonight at 7, just so you know. And for anyone that hasn't seen that come up, let me see, what is my topic for tonight? Where did I put that? Oh, Oh, yeah, here it is. The question for tonight at 7 is, how do you create new traditions after leaving Christianity? So if anyone happens to be free tonight, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I'll share a few introductory thoughts, but I'd love to hear us talk about new traditions, how to get past the old traditions, but also to create new ones, new habits, and new things that have meaning for us. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that. But anyway, wrapping up today, I want to go back to your comments, and we'll call it a day. But again, thank you to those of you who are willing to come back to the second live stream. I'm so sorry again for that issue. Really am. See here, Philip says, we have a radio station that plays secular music for 6 days of the week, but on Sundays it becomes God obsessed. Yeah, it's interesting how that works. Very interesting. I wasn't even really exposed to secular radio stations till I was a late teen. We just always played the Christian radio, so it was God stuff nonstop. We put it on in our house as background music. And I don't mean all music, just the pastor preaching, but it was like on low. So you could walk into the kitchen. They had the radio that was literally right on top of the fridge, and so you'd go into the kitchen to get something out of the fridge, get a cup of iced tea or something, and you would hear the preacher. There was hours and hours and hours a day. Let's see here, 1 second. Okay, I missed part of that conversation, but I'll just keep going. Does closet meaning hiding secret beliefs to not show? I'm not sure what you mean by that. The evil is ignored as a norm in society. Church speaks to sinners, not the saints. Yeah, I mean, the church is going to tell you you're a sinner and that they need you to consider yourself a sinner, right? Otherwise, you don't need to really come back and just go get raptured. You're ready for heaven. But yeah, they want to keep you bound. They want to tell you you need constant help. I have bipolar and PTSD, which is at least in part due to my Southern Baptist upbringing. Yeah, I would not be surprised if there's a lot of those are wrapped up in that. I mean, I'm not a professional by any stretch. I would never want to be seen or misinterpreted as one. So anything I say, take it with a grain of salt, that, nobody should think of me as a counselor. But it would not surprise me, just as a layperson speaking about it, if some of the PTSD we have and the issues are people having sort of two voices, as it were, in their heads. I mean, I'm not officially bipolar, but I would agree that we all in some ways had two voices in our head saying, you're human, you're good, you're fine, enjoy yourself. And the other side saying, hate yourself, you're awful. And certainly the PTSD, a lot of us went through that. And give them your money. Yeah, God wants your money. He really, really does. Churches keep you in the cycle to keep that tax-free tithing coming in. Yeah, keep coming back and give your money. Oraculum says, I think New Age is inspired by autobiography of Yogi, who was a Hindu trying to find some good in these three toxic religions without reading or knowing their history so we can spread yoga. I'm not sure about that history. That's fascinating. I would say, though, that my exposure to New Age stuff is the idea that there's like a higher consciousness that you can achieve through, whether it's through yoga, through meditation, through crystals, through just being in nature. There's nothing wrong with doing things to help you calm down and just to feel in touch with your body and your mind. But the idea of you're going to graduate to some higher level of consciousness, you might graduate to a higher level of calmness, but a higher level of consciousness to me is I see, just from where I'm standing, I mean, take everything I say with a grain of salt, but from where I'm standing, I don't see that as real. I haven't seen any evidence that really exists. See here, COA. Thank you, Tim, for this talk. Very deeply resonates. Staying tuned. Thank you so much. Yeah, tithe, whether you have any food or not, tithe is the most important thing to God. Tay, thank you so much. I'll be in touch with you as soon as I can. I believe if you're neurodivergent or have trauma issues, Christianity and religion is not a safe place to be. Yeah, I would agree. It's definitely not a safe place to be, and it's becoming slightly safer. But yeah, I mean, and you think too about the Bible, the Gospels. They talk about people who basically have epileptic seizures, and they describe that as the demons inside of you. And it says Jesus tells the demon to come out, but demons are gonna. Epileptic seizures are going to end naturally anyway. So it could just be if it actually happened, and I don't think Jesus was probably real, but if it had happened, then in that story in history, Jesus could have waited long enough until he kind of saw that this seizure was ending anyway, and just say, "I command you to stop," and within a minute it stops anyway. It's just natural. But the idea that Christianity and Jesus, the Jesus character, are painting things like epileptic seizures as demons is enough to tell you that they see mental health issues very, very wrongly. It's funny how God's expectations are usually judged by someone else's expectations. Yeah, very true. The saints are born with knowingness. The sinners love the emotional roller coaster of life. Yeah, it is a roller coaster, that's for sure. I can't believe it took me so long to realize. Yeah, just a few more here, and we'll call it a day for now. Imagine listening to artists like Ava Max and Lady Gaga for 6 days of the week, and then all of a sudden being bombarded with Christian music and preaching. Yeah. Let's see here. Trust Jesus. Harmonic Atheist. Do you put your faith in the idea that the earth is moving? I don't put my faith in it, but I'm aware that the earth, that the sun is a big magnet that's pulling us, that it's, as the sun goes through the universe, that it's, all the planets are basically cycling behind it. Yeah. I mean, I know that that's what astrophysics tells us. I wouldn't say my faith is in it. Let's see here. Radio in West Virginia, the same thing. Capitalism is the major driver of thinking and is adopted by religion and corrupts the purpose. Boom and bust, it's profit. Live parts, work therapy, different thought patterns in the brain, trying to survive. Psychology is all physical. There is no soul. I agree with that last part. I'm not sure about the first part, but yeah, psychology is very much wrapped up in how your brain. I mean, it's just we're just math. We're just chemicals. So yeah, I don't think there's a soul either. I think it's sad to admit that. I'm very brokenhearted to admit that. But yeah, I don't think there's a soul either. True Christianity believes that true Christian God will never send people to hell. Hell is just a contradictions. I reject negative from false piety Christianity. Again, I'm feeling like I'm not quite sure exactly what you're saying with some of these comments, Carla. They feel kind of disjointed. I don't want to make assumptions that I'm understanding what you're saying. But from what I think I'm reading about your comment there, it sounds like you're kind of cherry picking which parts of Christianity you want. I could be wrong if I'm misunderstanding, but if you want to cherry pick Christianity, that's certainly a path a lot of people take. It's your life. Do what you want to do with it. But at the end of the day, you're commanded in the Bible to not just create your own faith, and to have your own worldview system, but to perpetuate it. You have to go into the world and tell the gospel to every creature. So whatever you come up with, you're commanded to spread it. And so what if you're wrong? What if hell is supposed to be part of what you spread to the world? That's part of the poison of this. This is a virus that has to spread. And so you can reject what you want, but you're also commanded to spread it. And so are the other Christians. There's other Christians who are going to say hell is real. And you are cherry picking in a way that is disrespectful to the word of God. And they're going to perpetuate their Christian virus. You got to come back at some point to say, where did ancient Judaism come from? How did Christianity evolve out of it? What is it really all about? And I think if you're honest with the text, you realize a lot of it is about the Greco-Roman mystery cults. It's about Neo-Pythagoreanism, Neoplatonism, and it's very much about a lot of other weird issues, such as astrotheology and numerology, and sort of the early Kabbalah stuff. But a lot of it is it's another version of blood magic, which, we're going way, 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 way back to ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia at that point. So Earth is flat and not moving. Earth is in a very small universe. Yeah, I'm sorry, but flat earthers, you're in the wrong channel. I'm sorry. If there's yeah, flat Earth stuff, you're in the wrong channel. I'm sorry. What if that is all a lie and you're stationary? NASA says you're moving. Yeah, I'm sorry. It sounds like you're leaning towards flat Earth. You're on the wrong channel. I'm not even going to entertain your questions. You're on the wrong channel. But blessings to you in your journey. Okay, thank you, Arachnum. I appreciate you clarifying that. Well, I am going to wrap up at this point because I've kept you all for an hour here on this one, and I know I had the 10-minute sort of blurb that I did earlier that didn't end up working out very well. But I just want to say thank you again so much. Thank you for all the birthday wishes. Thank you for coming back a second time to talk about how Christianity keeps us in survival mode. It does feel like we just scratched the surface, but I think it's, we got to start somewhere. I'm going to be looking through some of the comments afterwards to see, glean from that. I would like to revisit this in a few weeks and sort of take it to the next level. Great stuff. Great stuff. But I do encourage you, please do keep thinking for yourself and keep getting to the point where you're saying, I trust myself. I love myself. I love who I am. I trust my intuition. And you need to get safe in your own skin, safe in your own mind. Get to the point where you love being you. You love the way your mind works. You love your life. And the more that we do that, I think the more that we do that we'll get to a point where some of the survival mode will slowly dissipate. Maybe it's going to be through other things, whether you're talking to friends more, being in community, being in therapy. But some of these things will eventually plant seeds that will grow into sort of the trees that create shade for you in the future. So let's do it. Thank you all so much, and I'll see some of you later tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern. Thanks again. Have a great day.